Hi, everyone. All right. So before I forget, your midterm drafts are due tomorrow morning, so that your final drafts, so I can put a grade on them. Okay. And if you have any questions, of course, you can ask them today, right now. But today is our short class. And so before I forget, I will go to the smart attendance. And so make sure that you can see this, because I always want you to see what I'm doing. And I think we're on. Yes, we are on. So go to smart attendance and go here to smart attendance and click on start attendance. And your number is 381. 381 is your smart attendance number, 381. So let me go to the chat and put that in the chat function. 381, 381, and there you go. Okay, so, all right. So let's remind ourselves where we stopped at the last class. And I opened up already the lesson plan. And okay, so yeah, there's I have to remember to get back to you regarding updates on your I would like you to send me a list of your questions that you're going to ask as a part of your semi-structured interview, as your basic outline of your questions that you're going to ask your interviewees. I already asked you, right, to find two people, two interviewees to interview as part of your narrative research on the two people, the two international students studying here in South Korea, maybe here at the Catholic University of Korea or outside, but Catholic University of Korea, but some other university in South Korea. And so I would like to see those questions from you, some list of questions that you come up, and so you can send them to me. I have to come up with a deadline also in terms of your submitting your research project, because I need to give you a deadline so that we know what the timeline is. We also I have to work on a final exam for this class, and so I'll be working on that as well to help you get ready to prepare for the final exam. So let's go back to the yes. Well, I mean, you can send it to me as an email. I mean, I've been posting my the material, we've been doing in class, these exercises where I ask you to come up with a list of questions. I show you my questions as well that I might ask if I were going to, begin to think about asking these questions. You can just send them to me as an email attachment, or well, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should make it an assignment. Okay, as an assignment. So let me think about that. Thank you very much, Gloria, for suggesting we should structure this a little more officially. So yeah, you saw, I mean, the kind of questions that I came up with, right? The 4 questions that and I think I did it with the other ones as well. So here's the Japanese tattoo, those 4 questions that I came up with. But I think I also elaborated this a little bit further by noting that also you always want to ask for the SES information, like who are these people, what is their age, what is their gender, if they want to give it, what is their family's economic condition, do they come from blue collar or white collar family, a professional family, or does the mother work, does the father work, how much education do they have? That kind of information is always necessary in order to do a qualitative study. You have to know something about the people you're interviewing, obviously. Who are they? When you start then asking them particular questions about this issue, for example, regarding time that we did at the last class. So yeah, something like this, right? Something like this, questions you would like to ask. So, okay, so then, of course, we have another example of something interesting coming up here. I am kind of surprised that the kind of reports that the New York Times is emphasizing or reporting from Tokyo. Here's another lifestyle type question, which I don't know how much of it's resonating in Korea, how much is shared. This is an article that came out just a week or two ago. that these individuals are marrying fictional characters in Japan. This man married a fictional character. He'd like you to hear him out. So it says here, in almost every way, Ahiko Kondo is an ordinary Japanese man. He's pleasant, easy to talk to. He has friends and a steady job and wears a suit and tie to work. There's just one exception. Kondo is married to a fictional character. He's married to an invention. His beloved Hatsune Miku is a turquoise-haired, computer-synthesized pop singer who has toured with Lady Gaga and starred in video games. After a decade-long relationship, one that Kondo says pulled him out of a deep depression, he held a small unofficial wedding ceremony in Tokyo in 2018. Miku, in the form of a plush doll, wore white as he was in a matching tuxedo. I think this is her. He married this. In Miku, Kondo has found love, inspiration, and solace, he says. He and his assortment of Miku dolls eat and sleep and watch movies together. Sometimes they sneak off on romantic getaways, posting photos on Instagram. Kondo, 38, knows that people think it's strange, even harmful. He knows that some, can you see that? I got to make sure you share a screen. Are you able to see that? I got to make sure you're able to see that. Knows that people think it's strange, even, okay. It says here, Kondo knows that people think it's strange and harmful. He knows that some, possibly those reading this article, hope he'll grow out of it. And yes, he knows that Miku isn't real, but his feelings. Yes. When we're together, she makes me smile, he said in a recent interview. In that sense, she's real. Kondo is one of thousands of people in Japan who have entered into thousands of people, not just one or two, thousands who've entered into unofficial marriages with fictional characters in recent decades. Served by a vast industry aimed at satisfying the every whim of a fervent fan culture. Tens of thousands more around the globe have joined online groups in which they discuss their commitment to characters from anime, manga, and video games. For some, the relationships are just for a laugh. Kondo, however, has long known that he didn't want a human partner. Partly it was because he rejected the rigid expectations of Japanese family life, but mostly it was because he had always felt an intense and even to him inexplicable attraction to fictional characters. Accepting his feelings was hard at first, but life with Miko, he argues, has advantages over being with a human partner. She's always there for him. She'll never betray him, and he'll never have to see her get ill or die. Kondo sees himself as part of a growing movement of people who identify as fictosexuals. That's partly what has motivated him to publicize his wedding and to sit for awkward interviews with news media around the globe. He wants the world to know that people like him are out there, and with advances in artificial intelligence and robotics allowing for more profound interactions with the inanimate, that their numbers are likely to increase. Aha, AI. It's not a political movement, he said, but a plea to be seen. It's about respecting other people's lifestyles. Pretend people, true feelings. It's not unusual for a work of art to provoke real emotions, anger, sorrow, joy, and the phenomenon of desiring the fictional is not unique to Japan. But the idea that fictional characters can inspire real affection or even love may well have reached its highest expression in modern Japan, where the sentiment has given rise to a highly visible subculture and become the basis for a thriving industry. The Japanese word for the feelings those characters inspire is mo, a term that has become shorthand for just about anything that is viscerally adorable. Business seminars have talked about tapping the mo market, and the government has promoted the notion in relation to cartoons as an important cultural export. The word and other specialized terms have resonated beyond Japan, with fictosexuals abroad often adopting them to articulate their own experience of love. Oh, somebody's got a... So the attendance number is 381. While unofficially marrying fictional characters remains rare, the economic juggernaut that has grown around Japanese fan culture since the 1970s has made it possible for more people to live out elaborate fantasies with their favorite characters. So, and they go on here. I don't know if I really want to cover all of this, but so let's suppose you were going to interview, or you're going to do a qualitative research study of these people. So here's Ahiko Kondo's wedding picture taken in 2018 when he married a doll, Hatsune Miku. There's Hatsune Miku. Okay. And Kino Horikawa's unofficial marriage certificate with Kunihiro Horikawa, a character from the mobile game Touken Ranbu in Tokyo. Horikawa and thousands of others are in devoted fictional relationships served by a vast industry aimed at satisfying the desires of a fervent fan culture. Kina Horikawa with Kunihiro Horikawa, a character from the mobile game Touken Ranbu, who is her fictional husband at a cafe in Tokyo. March 19, 2022. Horikawa and thousands of others are in devoted fictional relationships served by a vast industry aimed at satisfying the desires of a fervent fan culture. So I guess this is the character, her fictional husband. And Akihoko Kondo at home in Tokyo with a life-size doll of Hatsune Miku, the virtual pop star. He married in 2018, March. This is from March of this month, last month, or this year. Kondo and thousands of others are in devoted fictional relationships served by a vast industry aimed at satisfying the desires of a fervent fan culture. Okay, so so my question to you is, what kind of if you're going to interview these people, like you wanted to understand what's going on here. Remember, qualitative research involves exploratory research. You want to get basic information that you can't get from quantitative data. Like you can't ask them, you can't gather and do surveys with thousands or hundreds of these people and come up with quantitative data before you do some deep exploratory studies of what is going on with these individuals. So, and what this manifests, or what this might be significant in terms of societal trends in Japanese attitudes and norms and values. Again, you have to have a theoretical framework. You have to have some kind of theory of the family. Like, why are these people not acting like their parents? How many times do we react against our parents? I mean, you look at my life, right? I mean, I just think about this. My life is so much a reaction against my family's background. Why, but I didn't plan to, why are these, is that your theoretical framework, that these individuals are reacting in hostile reaction to their parents and to their parents' expectations and traditional Japanese society and its norms? I mean, I talked to another, I won't mention any names, but one of my former students who graduated a few years back, he came to my office and talked to me a week or two ago. He just came and he told me, he graduated some years ago and he's under this pressure from his parents to get married. He's living with his parents. He's got a job, but they keep pressuring him to get married. And he finds it to be very bothersome. It's adding to the stress he has to deal with. This is a big demand that the parents are placing upon him. He doesn't want to get married. He doesn't have enough money, but they keep pressuring him to get married. And he says it's not pleasant at all. Is that so? I mean, you have to have a theoretical framework that you bring to bear to begin the process of applying that theoretical framework, which we call deductive analysis. You gather the data and then you change your theoretical framework in response to the data that you gather. Make it, elaborate your theoretical framework, develop it further, qualify it, or maybe toss it out completely if you think, no, it's got nothing to do with family. It's more tied up with, it's more important is the job market expectations and professional pressures on people. I don't know, right? But that's why you do qualitative research. So the New York Times, the most prestigious news source in the United States, decided they should have an article on this, which is itself significant. Is this cutting edge? Is this going to happen? Are you going to see this emerge now in South Korea? Is it already started in South Korea? I don't know. Is it going to? Is it going to come to the United States? So what kind of research question or hypothesis would you develop to begin to, or at least think about right now? You can change it, but just as a topic of interest and research you want to focus on, and what kind of questions would you ask? these people in terms of beginning to gather the data you need for your exploratory qualitative research project. Clearly, they're not ashamed to be covered. I mean, this person is now known by millions of people around the world, in Japan and outside, like in this class, who he is. We know his name, we have his picture, and he doesn't seem to be too bothered by that he might be a target of really negative reaction. People sending him social media posts, hostile posts, making fun of him, mocking him, attacking him, threatening him. Is that important? Would you focus on those kind of questions? Like, why did you decide to come out and let everybody know? Like, and see what they say, right? So I'll let you think about that. And to give you an example, this is an example of why we use qualitative research. If we don't know, if we don't have enough basic information about what's going on here, we need to start someplace. So we need to do qualitative research to begin to explore this phenomenon. And then, of course, we can do some quantitative research later. So back to the Cresswell and Poth. Make sure we cover that. And I forgot to turn on the record button for the last 10 minutes of last class. So, which was, I think, unfortunate, because this is kind of interesting in terms of doing narrative research, because you're doing narrative research. That's your project. And so we went through these 7 steps here. So I don't know if I really want to go through them again. You can go through them. You know, the point is, you're telling a story. You're telling a story in your qualitative research. You really, in terms of telling a story about the experiences of the persons, the 2 individuals you're interviewing. And oh, thank you. So that's one case, one type of qualitative research. It says here, determine if the research, the procedure for conducting narrative research, determine if the research problem is best examined using a narrative approach. I think for the Japanese people marrying fictional characters, yeah. Find out what caused this boy or this woman to get to the point where they're going to marry a fictional character and let the whole world know about it. Select 1 or more individuals and gather their stories through multiple types of information, including, you know, background information, their experiences, their media reports. Consider how the data collection and recording can take different shapes. Embed information about the context of the stories into data collection, analysis, and writing. Analyze the participants' stories by using the process of restoring. Embed a collaborative approach in the collection and telling of stories, and present the narrative in written form by adapting the general reporting and structure as appropriate. So narrative researchers tell stories of individuals' experiences. This is the kind of phenomenological research is, if you do a PhD, a dissertation in graduate school in qualitative research, you might well do a phenomenological study. There you interview 6 to 12 people. And a phenomenological study explains the common meaning for several individuals of their lived experiences regarding a concept or phenomenon. So I had a student do a qualitative doctoral dissertation on the phenomenological study, interviewing imams, Muslim clerics in the United States about the issue of Sharia law and the impact of Sharia law debate on their experience living and work and teaching and living and ministering in the United States. There's a big controversy particularly among pro-Trump white nationalists that political Islam wants to impose Sharia law in the United States, at least as it applies to Muslims living in the United States. So, for example, requiring, you know, women to wear headscarves and so on. And so she did a phenomenological study of these several imams about their experience in dealing with these questions or issues in their day-to-day existence and their lived experience of leading their Muslim congregation in this American context. So it differs from narrative study, which reports the experience of a single individual or several individuals. As these individuals experience a single phenomenon, phenomenologists focus on what these several individuals have in common. So grief, for example, is universally experienced. So, what's a big topic of grief? There's been a lot of reporting in the New York Times about climate grief, people feeling grief about global climate change, or pandemic grief, the losses during the pandemic. How has that shaped us? The fact that, for example, I lost both my parents in 2020 and 2021, and I couldn't go to the funeral. I had to stay here because of quarantine. So there's millions of stories like that people have been infected by this quarantine. And so what impact has that had on people? What is that impact has that had on people's outlook in terms of their jobs, about their life experiences? This is the kind of questions you want to ask in qualitative research. Phenomenology's basic purpose is to reduce or condense individual experiences with a phenomenon to a description of the universal essence, that is, a grasp of the very nature of the thing. Examples of human experiences of phenomena: insomnia, anger, grief, being left out, undergoing coronary artery bypass surgery. These are all an experience that you want to address by interviewing these several people. The researcher gathers data from persons who have experienced the phenomenon. The researcher then develops a composite description of the experience for all of the individuals. The description consists of what they experienced and how they experienced it. It means the lived experience. So the philosophical assumptions of phenomenological studies, they focus on the lived experiences of persons. These experiences are conscious ones. The focus is on the development of descriptions of the essences of these experiences. They tend not to focus on explanations or analyses. So phenomenology is an important branch of philosophy, and epistemology, like how do we understand and know the world around us? So there's some important names. This seems to be really essentially important in terms of understanding qualitative research, is the philosophical foundations of this work. They mention names like Husserl. If any of you go further in philosophy, you're going to read about Husserl, right? And of course, the other qualitative approaches developed as well, but like narrative research, we've always been doing narrative research. We used to call it biographies, right? But that's what they called it in previous editions of the Poth and Cresswell book, biography. Now they call it narrative research. Okay. So it's an emphasis on the phenomenon to be explored. It is phrased in a single concept or idea. For example, the education idea of professional growth, or the psychological concept of grief, or for example, the healthcare idea of a caring relationship. These are terms often used, but we don't really know what it means. Like, what is pandemic grief? What does it mean to grieve losses from the pandemic? What does that mean? I mean, what does it mean when you lose your parents? We all lose our parents. What does it mean to grieve over that? You know it's going to happen. I knew it was going to happen. It's been happening since the dawn of time. So what does it mean to grieve over that? A group of individuals with whom to explore this phenomenon, it usually a heterogeneous group may be identified with, which varies in size from 3 to 4 individuals to 10 to 15. With regard to the basic ideas involved in conducting a phenomenology, a philosophical discussion is included. It focuses on the lived experience of the individuals, that is, the subjective experiences of the phenomenon, and the objective experiences of something in common with other people. Like the pandemic, right? So there is not a clear distinction between the subjective individual experience and the objective facts of each individual situation. So it lies on a continuum between qualitative and qualitative research. The researcher brackets him or herself out of the study by discussing his or her own personal experiences with the phenomenon. So you've got to, again, explain explicitly who you are as the researcher in your position in regard to the phenomenon you're studying. Thereby, the researcher separates his or her own experiences from the experiences of the participants so that the researcher can focus on those. This is an ideal situation, but the reader has to determine how well the researcher has succeeded. Right? The researcher should be explicit in this attempt to do so. The researcher may include his or her hopes and fears regarding the project. For example, the hypothesis that the researcher hoped to prove. So again, this notion that the researcher is part of the process of study, interviewing persons who have experienced the phenomenon, that is, for example, a data collection procedure. However, some phenomenological studies have used the other sources of data, such as documents, observations, and even poems. Data analysis, it can follow systematic procedures, moving from narrow units of analysis, like significant statements, then categorizing them into broader units, meaning units, for example, meaning units, then moving on to detailed descriptions that summarize the two elements, what the individuals have experienced, how they have experienced it. The conclusion of a phenomenology culminates in a descriptive section discussing the essence of the experience of those individuals. It incorporates what they've experienced and how they have experienced it. So, I'm having to deal with this now since I can't get people to be interviewed on Zoom and be recorded. I'm going to have to try to do a phenomenological study using documents, but I have to decide what documents I'm going to use. So I'm dealing with that right now. Types of phenomenology. There's two approaches to phenomenology. Hermeneutical phenomenology. It is oriented towards the lived experience, that is phenomenology, while interpreting the texts of life. It involves a dynamic interplay among 6 research activities. And here he cites von Manens in the health literature. The researcher turns to an abiding concern, such as, for example, mothering, driving, reading, running. The researcher reflects on the essential themes of this lived experience. The researcher then writes a description of this phenomenon. The researcher maintains a strong relation to the topic of inquiry while balancing the parts of the writing to the entire project. The researcher makes an interpretation mediating between the different lived experiences. So, for example, Icelandic researchers focusing on the experience of spirituality in their study of 10 persons receiving palliative care and its impact on their well-being. You know what palliative care means? People are dying, and you're just trying to make them comfortable until they die. I mean, this is an important topic, right? Considering so many of our people are getting older, and I don't want to go into, it's too personal, but like so many people I know get old and they have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and it's really difficult to watch your loved ones, fall apart like that, over several years. Their brains degrade and they can't. So these topics are really, really important for the healthcare field. Palliative means these patients have terminal illness, so care focusing on easing suffering as well as slowing it, if not stopping the progress of the illness. The religious and non-religious aspect were emphasized. Implications for theological approach in palliative care is discussed. So what role do priests and ministers play in providing palliative care? So you can see how the healthcare industry would be really interested in this kind of research. And then transcendental phenomenology, also called psychological phenomenology, focuses less on the interpretation of the researcher and more on the lived experiences of patients. Transcendental means everything is perceived freshly as if for the first time. This summary draws upon Duquesne studies in phenomenological psychology. So Duquesne University, I went to the University of Pittsburgh for my graduate school. Duquesne University is an old, rich, powerful Catholic university that is also in the United States, in Pittsburgh. There's also a U.S. National Center for Phenomenological Psychological Training and Research. Like, it's one of the centers for this kind of approach in psychology. Duquesne University. The researcher seeks to achieve it by epoche, or bracketing. That's a Greek term. That is setting aside their own experiences as much as possible. But this condition is seldom perfectly achieved. You'd have to strive for it, but you're not going to do it completely fully, because we're human beings. But the researcher tries and does so by describing his or her own experience with the phenomenon. Procedures. First, identify a phenomenon to study. Second, bracketing out one's own experiences. Third, collecting data from several persons who have experienced the phenomenon. Fourth, the researcher develops a textual description of the experiences of the persons, what the participants experienced. Fifth, a structural description of their experiences, that is, how they were experienced in terms of conditions, situations, or context. Sixth, develop a combination of textual and structural descriptions, thereby to convey the overall essence of the experience. again, this pandemic, once in a century phenomenon, you know, what impact did it make? What did it do? Well, we sort of have an idea that it had some big impact, but we don't really know fully what the impacts. We need to do this kind of qualitative research. Like I told you, CUK is not the same as it was when I first got here, or even 5 years ago. It's a different place. Now, is it going to go back to the way it was when we start taking these off and everybody's allowed to come to class? I don't know. And I don't know if that ever is really going to happen. Procedures for conducting phenomenological research. According to Moutsakis, the major procedure steps in the process of phenomenological research. First, the researcher determines whether phenomenological approach is most appropriate for a particular research problem. This type of research is most appropriate for the type of problem in which understanding the common or shared experiences of several individuals is important. Understanding these common experiences is necessary in order to develop a deeper understanding of the features of the phenomenon or to develop common practices and policies. Second, the researcher identifies a phenomenon of interest to study, for example, anger, what it means to be underweight, professionalism, or what it means to be a wrestler. The topics of interest may vary. The beginning of fatherhood, riding a bike, the experience of learning. Third, the broad philosophical assumptions of phenomenology are recognized and specified by the researcher. You know, I haven't yet seen any textbooks come out in courses that have shown or discussed the impact of the pandemic. Like the Trompenar's book that we used at the beginning of the semester, he makes 1 or 2 references to the pandemic and that's it. But I would expect we're going to see lots of interesting reflections on the pandemic when Cresswell and Poth come up, for example, with the next edition of this book. For example, the researcher may write about the combination of individual experiences with objective reality. The researcher might highlight that the participants direct these experiences toward an object and hence they are conscious. For example, being an international exchange student is oriented towards the class professor or towards specific fellow students. The researcher, as much as possible, bracket out his or her own experiences, which means writing explicitly about them. Fourth, the researcher collects data from individuals who have experienced the phenomenon. Typically, this data collection consists of multiple and in-depth interviews with participants. One researcher, Polkinghorne, recommends that a researcher interview 5 to 25 individuals who have all experienced the phenomenon. Other types of data collection include music, poetry, journals, observations, as well as other forms of art. As von Manen notes, also formally written responses, taped conversations, as well as vicarious experiences of films, poetry, drama, and novels. The researcher asks 2 broad general questions to each of the participants. 1, in terms of the phenomenon, what have you experienced? 2, in terms of the experiences of the phenomenon, what contexts or situations have influenced you or affected you? Other types of open-ended questions may be asked as well, but these 2 questions above focus on gathering the data that will allow for both textual and structural description of the experiences. Ultimately, this data allows for an understanding of the participants' common experiences. So you saw that term open-ended. You ask questions that are not yes or no, or strongly agree, disagree. No, you let them talk. You get as much text as you can from them. You want them to give you as much answer as they possibly can. Fifth, there's then phenomenological data analysis. The researcher goes through the data gathered from questions 1 and 2 above through, for example, interview transcripts, and the researcher highlights significant statements, as well as sentences or quotes, offer comprehension of how the participants experience the phenomenon. This step has been called horizontalization. Next, the researcher then develops clusters of meaning from these significant statements by categorizing or typologizing them. Sixth, the researcher then prepares a textual description of what the participants experienced using these significant statements and themes. The researcher also uses these significant statements to compose a description of the context or setting that affected how the participants experienced the phenomenon. It is called imaginative variation or structural description. And Moutsakis, whoever Moutsakis is, provides an additional step. The researcher also writes about his or her own experiences and also about the situation and context that have shaped their experiences. Cresswell prefers to shorten this step, including it in a personal statement at the beginning of the phenomenology or in the methods section of the study, including a discussion of the role of the researcher. Seventh, the researcher then uses the structural and textual descriptions to compose a composite description which presents the essence of the phenomenon, the essential invariant structure or essence. Again, you need a theoretical framework to do this. It focuses primarily on the participants' common experiences. For example, the same underlying structure is present in the experience of all participants. For example, the grief is the same for whatever loss, such as a loved one, a puppy, or a parakeet. It is a descriptive passage. It is typically a long paragraph or two. The reader should conclude that he or she now has a better understanding of the phenomenon. I better understand what it's like for someone to experience that. Eighth, the researcher presents the essence of the experience in written format. Some argue that the practice of phenomenological inquiry is inseparable from the practice of writing. To communicate phenomenological research, various forms include the following: systematic exploration, that is, the phenomenon is placed within its temporal or spatial context, or that is, the written presentation is organized in terms of ever deepening understanding of the phenomenon. The following format is used: introduction, it familiarizes the reader with the phenomenon. Experience of the researchers are in some cases presented. And research procedures, including a rationale for the use of phenomenology, philosophical assumptions, details about data collection analysis. Third, report of how the phenomenon was experienced, including significant statements. Fourth, conclusion with appropriate composite description of the essence of the phenomenon. And just to conclude this section, challenges in phenomenology: providing a deep comprehension of a phenomenon as several individuals experience it is the aim of phenomenology. For groups such as therapists, health personnel, teachers, and policymakers, knowing some common experiences can be valuable. It can also be streamlined from a form of data collection by using a single interview or multiple interviews with participants. So the Moutsakis approach outlined above is good for novice researchers. The philosophical assumption of the researcher should be clear. Selection of the participants must be given careful consideration, being sure that they have experienced the phenomenon in question. Bracketing of the researcher's own experiences may be challenging because interpretation of data always involves the assumptions that the researcher favors. It is necessary to be consciously reflective of these assumptions as the researcher. The researcher may not exclude these assumptions, but the researcher can be explicit about how and where he or she introduces these assumptions into the study. So this is kind of like an important chapter because it just lays out how you do these different forms of qualitative research. And they all basically relate to each other. But we need to go to our debate topic. So let's go to the debate topic. And here we go to the bottom here. And to South Koreans, operationalizing a concept in measurable terms is necessary for the concept to be a scientific one. So let us go into breakout rooms, and we'll make 2 rooms. And I don't remember who is pro and con. So let me make room 1 pro and room 2 con, and then ask you what room you want to be in. So Gloria, you want to be pro? You're pro? Katika, you're pro?
Yes, I'm pro.
What about Daywalk? You're pro? Oh, okay. So we'll move you to con. And where did it happen to the other? Okay. Oh, okay. And Min Sun Young, are you pro or con?
I'm on pro.
Okay, so I'll move you to pro. And Young Jun Shin, are you pro or con? Young Jun Shin? Young Jun Shin? Young Jun Shin. Well, I'll keep you in con then, if you're not, don't protest. So then who's going to speak first for pro? And heads is the person on the bottom of the list. And it's tails. So heads, it's Gloria. Tails, it's Kritika. And it's heads. So Gloria, make your pro statement, Gloria. Oh, Can you turn on your microphone? Can you speak through your computer?
Yeah.
Okay, you're right. It does make a noise. So let me just bring my
So I'm pro for the statement to South Korean operationalizing a concept in measurable terms is necessary for the concept to be a scientific one. Imagine starting a project and you need to submit a report on it. What about the statement based on the prior statement and the inductive or deductive evidence research? How could we achieve something in scientific field without measure it? We should gain a strong knowledge of the approach we choose. And even on social sciences, when you focus on individuals' behavior, you have to collect data from the ground to the most specific advent. Data can take different forms, but every statement should be backed up by evidence and collection of information. It is to the utmost importance to always provide proofs of a concept being built. It could, for instance, begin with situational and context-sensitive data, but their collection is needed. Even though measuring is necessary, let's not forget that in qualitative approach in research, we work with humans and behavior and attitudes, and that social interaction are made to transition and negotiate relationship between the participant and the inquirer.
and Deok is Khan. So let me bring the microphone to Deok.
Thank you, Gloria, for your speech. But I'm skeptical with the statement. But as you mentioned, collecting data is really important, and also justify terms clearly is really important. But I would also mention that social science or humanities studies are different from natural sciences. For example, in narrative research, listening interviewees' oral history requires understanding the terms in his or her view. So it is hard to understand the term scientifically or measurably. So a researcher should understand interviewees' terms in cultural and historical context. So if you try to interpret the terms scientifically and strictly, there can be bound to be a little gap. So, and especially in non-European societies like East Asia or Africa, they have different traditional meanings in each terms, and those could be a little bit different from Western view, I think.
Okay, Kritika for pro.
In both quantitative and qualitative research, it's important to study each variable in the research by breaking them down into measurable concepts, which is also known as operationalization. By doing this, it reduces the researcher's subjectivity of the study and increases reliability of the research, which then could be easier for the public to conceptualize once it's published. According to Creswell and Pott, most researchers start off with a theory or a broad concept that will then require further research to break it down. And as a result, for scientific research, which is generally more specific or difficult for unspecialized groups to understand, it's helpful if the research is broken down into simpler concepts so that it reaches more people and is easier to digest. So to conclude, it is safe to assume that South Koreans think that operationalizing a concept in measurable terms is necessary for the concept to be a scientific one.
Young Jun Shin for Khan, going once. Young Jun Shin for Khan, going twice. Young Jun Shin for Khan, going 3 times. All right, Young Jun Shin is not speaking. What about Moon Son Young? Moon Son Young.
I'm on the side of the pro. I think to make a concept operationalization is the most necessary source to be simple. It makes the research course to have one belief about what you have studied. In South Korea, when you had interview with one or two people, we usually using the measure things like chart, not only for world cost, The person who usually say the beyond the word, like Trump tweeted, considered very non-scientific one. He is just a logic same man in SK, but showing the logic with the usually things, the power are appeared and they have to change the lead movement. What can we do with that before? What is changed depends selecting our society and our country. Our business must focus on the West globalization movement, like age matter. It can bring more positive effect in military part at easy. The scientific one person can the most great change to the audience in SK. Thank you.
Young Jun Shin, last chance. Young Jun Shin. Young Jun Shin.
Yeah.
Go.
Uh, uh, um, I don't think I think that operationalizing a concept in measure term makes the concept scientific one, because scientifically explainable phenomenon have a characteristics, because it means that cause and effect are related between their certain role, which means that the cause and effect are constant no matter who observed the phenomenon. In other words, objectivity can be said to be one of the important characteristics of science. And in order for a concept to be scientific, it is necessary to have an objective standard to be accepted by everyone. In order to prove objectivity, quantities of substances must be determined in measured terms and tested in equal amounts. The results change every time, so you won't know what causes the change. This applies equally to concepts. If a concept to be scientific, it must to be valid for others, not for me. If there is no objective standard that anyone can accept when explaining a concept to others, it will not be recognized as reliable information, which means that it's not scientific. So concept to be scientific, it is necessary to operate the concept in measured terms.
Wow.
The concept will lose objectivity and have no role communication with others.
In order, yeah, for scientific knowledge needs to be valid for others, not for me. I like that statement. Okay. You finished?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let me shut down this class because I need time to save the file.